Dr. Pratem Bahal is an associate professor in the Department of English in Jhansi HNS College, Shivasagar, Assam. He is one of the well-known young writers, best for his work in Assamese literature. He has innumerable works published in Assamese and English and has achieved many prizes and accolades for his creative works. Among the various awards he has been bestowed upon him, the most prominent ones are the Poet of the Year Award, Kalaguru Havasini Sipbili Bhatta, Poet Har Bhattacharya Award. He mainly works in the fields of Assamese poetry, prose, story, and regularly pens in reputed newspapers and magazines. He makes his contribution to Assamese literature with 5 anthologies of poetry and 2 books on prose, published in Banalata, the prestigious publication house of Assam, and many edited books and literary works he has to his credits. He has also been known for a voluntary social worker and was honored with the District Best Youth Award 2007 and 8. So we welcome you, sir, and delighted to have you with us.
Namaskar. Very good afternoon to you, Subra Jamal, and all of you attending in this conference. First of all, I would like to offer my heartfelt gratitude to Cape Cumbrian Trust and Lavender Literary Club, and all the honorable members of the organizing committee of this 3-day international conference, and also to the respected academicians who have been associated in this conference from different parts of the globe. My sincere honor to Dr. Faiza Hassanat ma'am, who has presented a thought-provoking as well as interesting lecture. I herewith welcome all the paper presenters and hope their presentation will make this technical session successful. And so, without much delay, Subra Jamal. So, without much delay, let me call them one by one to present their paper.
Yes, sir. Yes, please.
So first, I would like to call Dr. Madhusri Kalimani. She's an assistant professor Rani Sanappa University, Karnataka, and she has a paper on ecofeminism in Kaswar Nahid's poem, "The Grass is Really Like Me." So, may I request,
Hello,
am I audible?
you're audible, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, fine. So, may I start your presentation?
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
But one thing I must mention here, so honorable and dear participants, you are given 9 or 10 minutes each for your presentation, and please be strict to time. So I would like to call Dr. Madhusri Kalimani. Ma'am, please proceed.
Okay, sir. A very good afternoon to everyone. I feel privileged amidst all the eminent scholars to present my paper. My paper is titled as Ecofeminism in Kishwar Nahid's The Grass is Really Like Me. But before I begin with my paper, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Madhusri Kalimani, working as assistant professor in Rani Chennamma University, Belgaum from Karnataka. So moving back to my paper, the title of the paper, if we begin discussing about it, it is all about ecofeminism, where we will talk about how earth is related to the feministic aspects, where earth can be related to the woman or the woman's body. And I have chosen Kishwar Nahid. Kishwar Nahid is a poet from Pakistan. She is also a feminist. She has written a couple of poems, and I have chosen one of the poem titled "The Grass is Really Like Me," where there is a lot of discussion about ecofeminism in this poem. So ecofeminism is a part of feminism, definitely. It's a theory of representing women through symbolic images of earth and nature. Earth and nature are naturally related to women as they have the common connectivity of creation, because both the aspects here are connected, are symbolic with the power of creation. Natural catastrophes have been the reaction of nature whenever the human generation has outraged it. Likewise, the woman also reacts to man when there is harassment and domination over her. So, man in the patriarchal society has not only dominated nature but also women, which is the known fact. But he has been defeated consistently as nature and women are the creators and who become the masters of the world. So when I begin to talk about Kishwar Nahid, but before that, let me talk about what is ecofeminism, a bit of throwing light over the topic ecofeminism. So we have been talking about ecofeminism again, I guess, since decades, and it is related or it is the part of feminism. When we talk about ecofeminism, it is considered as a philosophical and political theory and a movement which combines ecological concerns with feminist ones regarding both as resulting from male domination of society. It reveals the relationship of woman and nature, where women synonyms with nature in aspects like childbirth and creation, moods and seasons, fertility, silence, and symbolic protests. Ecofeminists begin with gender as a category of analysis. A feminist approach uses gender analysis as the starting point, and gender is the lens through which the initial description and analysis occur. Thus, while many feminists agree that ecology is a feminist issue, they differ over the nature and desirability of ecofeminism. Ecofeminism is based on certain fundamental claims that point to the existence of important connections between the oppression of women and oppression of nature. It is essential to understand the nature of these connections in order to understand the oppression of women and nature. And finally, every feminist theory must include an ecological perspective and vice versa. Ecofeminist theory has brought into sharp focus the links between development and gender. It has highlighted the fact that the violence against nature and against women is built into dominant development model. Ecofeminist literature portrays the historical exploitation and domination of women and nature as going hand in hand, and both are seen as victims of development. It is evident that any harm to nature harms women equally, since women are considered closer to nature than men. So moving on to Kishwar Nahid, who is from Pakistan. If there is a Pakistani feminist who poses a serious threat to men through her work, her style, her manner, and through ceaseless verbal challenge, it is none other than Kishwar Nahid. She is known for her utter feministic poetry qualities. She does this with a professional dedication which either endures or enrages. There are no half measures in her poetry. At 47, she was widowed. She's a mother of two grown sons, completely independent financially. She's above many strictures that other women in Pakistan would have to observe. Those which remain, she flouts with relish. Whilst Kishwar was an editor once, she was she was charged with various offences on 30 different occasions. One of these was charge of obscenity brought against her after she published an abridged version of Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex. She won the court battle and managed to have her grade as an officer restored, which had been stripped as a punishment. So Kishwar, the poetess, is perhaps the most prolific poet of her generation, as her writing becomes more political, developing rapidly partly because of her determination to expand her work and partly in response to the political climate in Pakistan, which became increasingly repressive towards women. Her search for growth led her to a detailed study of progressive contemporary poets from several countries, many of whom she translated into Urdu in a volume which is often accused of having been put together too hastily. So Kishwar's free verse and style have been criticized for lack of polish, for shoddiness, but what is missing in terms of poetic craft is compensated for adequately by her enormous range, boundless energy, and uninhibited honest exploration of themes. Her poems range from traditional love poems written in the early years to those dealing with hysterectomy, male chauvinism, censorship, American intervention in Pakistan, and a host of feminist issues. To date, her work includes several volumes of poetry, Lips That Speak, Unnamed Journey, poems. So there are many other poems where the collection of the poem is called as We Sinful Women, where she talks about the identity crisis of women. So this poem which I have chosen is titled as The Grass is Really Like Me, wherein in this poem she compares the woman's life to the grass which is mowed down every other day, where it is not allowed to spring up, where it is not allowed to grow up. And she also talks about the gender politics and how the patriarchal society or the patriarchal man has been suppressing the woman, as the lawn mower also suppresses the growth of the grass. But whatever it is, at the end of the day, it's the woman who has to spring back, because she has the power of creation. So that is how the poet has been talking about the grass is really like me. So the poem Grass is Really Like Me by Kishwar Nahid is an epitome of ecofeminism, because she has taken the part of nature, that is the grass, the growth of something. The point here is the growth, the unhindered growth, I can say. So Kishwar Nahid is a Pakistani poetess who has struggled all the while to subdue patriarchy through her feministic poems. She is known for her feministic poems which reveal her ideas of protest. So I can very well say that she is quite rebellious in her nature, and her tone is quite sarcastic. This poem represents a part of nature which is mowed down, symbolizing the man's suppression over woman and how a woman rebels to exist in spite of man's dominance over her. The poem is highly symbolic in nature because she brings in several connections with the woman's body and the grass's growth. So it is symbolic in nature, representing vivid images, vivid meanings, and definitely it is quite sarcastic in tone as well as in style. So the poet begins the poem by saying that the grass is also like her. This is the very first sentence in her poem. The grass is also like her. It has to unfold itself, or it has to unfurl itself, open up itself beneath the foot of the pedestrians or the walkers who walk upon it, beneath the foot to fulfill itself. She uses the term fulfill. So if there is fulfillment for the grass, it has to be only sensed. It has to sense its identity only when someone stamps upon it. Okay. The very first line proposes symbols like foot and grass, which can be compared here as man and woman. Foot here is compared to the man, and grass here is compared to the woman's existence. So this is in the very first, or at the very outset, or in the beginning of the poem, she talks about, she proposes this very idea of protest by beginning the poem that foot and grass here are the man and the woman. She questions about the wetness of grass, which, she is talking about the dewdrops present on the grass, which manifests the power of creation and not shame. She's also talking about the woman's body here. She tries to compare or connect the woman's body with the grass. She questions about the wetness of grass, which manifests the power of creation, and it should not be considered as shame. So when we discuss about the woman's body, it's quite considered as a taboo. It's quite considered as a stereotype where we don't openly discuss about the general body parts of the women, or what happens, or where actually what happens in her body. So most of the times we consider it to be a very shameful act. We feel very awkward to talk openly about the woman's body, but it should not be considered as shame, and it is the very natural representation of the nature that is inhibited in the body parts of the woman. The grass is mowed down, it is cut down every other day by the lawn mower as soon as it raises its head as soon as it springs every morning. As it raises its head, and the mower who comes, and he is obsessed to make it velvet by cutting. He keeps on cutting, the lawn mower keeps on cutting the grass in order to find the smoothness. So the word velvet here symbolizes, it is not only about the smoothness here is the literal meaning of the language, but what actually is analyzed or criticized here is how to suppress it. When the grass is mowed down, it is symbolically a talk or the representation of the suppression of women in the patriarchal society. So the grass is mowed down by the lawnmower as soon as it raises its head. The poet here compares this act of mowing symbolically with the way of suppressing the women in the patriarchal society or the male dominated society, which can happen only through harassment and molestation. We can also talk about the rapes. We can also talk about the murders. Harassment and molestation are probably not the exact words to be discussed here. So she questions history. In the next few lines of the poem, she begins questioning history, the patriarchal history, the domination, and the man, how he has been struggling hard. The man has been, patriarchal enough till date. I don't know about the future, but the history also represents or tells us, or it elucidates how man has been keeping up with the patriarchal notions or the patriarchal ideologies in order to suppress the women in the society. So it can be considered as a patriarchal struggle as well. So he has been struggling to mow her down in all the levels which are present in the society. It is not, in somewhere, she is suppressed, or in some other way she is not suppressed. No, it is not like that. In all the levels, she is mowed down or she is suppressed in the patriarchal society. So in the next lines, she clarifies, I have to tell you how rebellious she becomes, how protestive she becomes. In the next lines,
Dr. Modi, Salamini, you please sum up.
Okay. For a few more sentences, I will sum up.
Okay.
In the next line, she clarifies that neither Earth's nor woman's desire to manifest life can be stopped. So how much ever your struggle is, she says, I'm not going to stop. Further, the poet elucidates that all those who are mighty and defeated have to fall back to earth one fine day, because your life begins with the earth and it has to end with earth. She sarcastically compares the fallen man to mere straw, showcasing the difference between the straw which is dry and dead, whereas grass which is wet and alive. So she compares man as straw and herself as grass. The poet concludes by declaring that how much ever you try to mow down the grass and women, she springs back like phoenix, as she is the goddess of creation. So this was my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'm sorry if I have taken extra time. Thank you, sir.
It's a nice presentation, Dr. Modusri Kalimani.
Thank you, sir.
So you have cited an example from a very beautiful poem, that is "The Grass is Really Like Me." So I will comment on your presentation at the end of this technical session. So let me name the remaining 4 paper presenters of this session. So we'll meet after the presentation of the remaining 4. So next will be Ansal. He is a research scholar, Kalinga University, Gurugram, Haryana, and then he will be followed by Muhammad Yaqub Ali. He is an assistant professor, Department of English, Islamic University, and then a joint paper that will be presented by Mousumi Aslam. She's a research scholar, Department of English, Nurul Islam Center for Higher Education, Tamil Nadu, and which Dr. V.S. Bindu, he is an assistant professor, Department of English from the same institution. And the last but not the least, he is Sada, Firdaus Alam. He is a PhD research scholar, Department of English, Ranchi University, Jharkhand. So I would like to request Ansal Dahiya, you please present your paper.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you, sir. So I'm going to present a paper which is titled The Subversion of Gender Roles by Girish Karnad. It is a reading of two of his plays, Nagmandal and Haivadan. These are very popular and selective plays. That is why I considered to present a paper on these two. Okay. In the words of Rebecca and Simon Cusack, gender stereotypes are concerned with the social and cultural construction of men and women due to their different physical, biological, sexual, and social functions. More broadly, they can be thought of as conventions that underwrite the social practice of gender and gender stereotypes in an overarching term which refers to a structured set of beliefs about the personal attributes of men and women. The ubiquitousness of such gender stereotypes have led to internalization of these roles by both genders. Most of the times, people assume gender roles unconsciously without questioning the inherent power politics which is attached to them. Women in Karnad's plays do not just have a nominal presence, but are essential to the development of the play. His women characters are unconventional, bold, who do not hesitate to speak up their mind. Whether the character is a queen in plays like Tughlaq or Bali, or a modern woman in plays like A Heap of Broken Images, Wedding Album, etc., they express their individuality and sexuality freely. His plays are not unrealistic in terms of the condition of women in society. His women characters face the challenges of patriarchal and heteronormative society, yet using myth as mechanism, Karnad makes them overcome these challenges. Karnad depicts a clash between modern and traditional sensibility. This modern sensibility treats consensual sex before marriage or sometimes outside marriage as something normal. On the other hand, traditional sensibility does not accept excessive liberalism in such matters and prescribes certain norms and even taboos in relation to this desire. Girish Karnad has given a voice and space to the sexual needs of women by celebrating extramarital relationships through his plays. His parents' love relationship affected his literary sensibility, which led to the addition of human touch in his creative endeavors. In an interview with Tutul Mukherjee, he talks about his experience, which led to his sensibilities and which led to his current views regarding the extramarital relationships in the plays. So I quote, he says, I was an adolescent when I learned that both my parents were married before they married each other. In fact, my mother was a widow when she was 19, but instead of being confined to her home, she showed extraordinary courage and became a nurse. And this is how she met my father. My father had an ailing wife who required nursing. They must have lived together before they finally got married. They made me realize that my mother was a human and had human desires. Iron Good. Karnad uses supernatural help in order to let his female characters give an expression to their sexual creativity. Though his women are aware of their physical needs and do not hesitate in giving an expression to them through extramarital affairs, yet Karnad functions within the bounds of the morality prescribed by the society, and women protagonists, namely Rani and Padmini in these two plays, have to pay the prices for subverting these gender norms. The first play which I'm going to talk about is Nagmandal, which talks about the eternal love triangle resulting in adultery between Rani, her husband Apanna, and the supernatural being called Naga. The female protagonist, Rani, recently got married to Apanna, who keeps her imprisoned in their house like a caged bird, abruptly talks to her during the day, and even visits a concubine every night while Rani is lonely and helpless in the house. Kurudava, an old woman, gives a potion to Rani, claiming that, I quote, he will make you a wife instantly, unquote, after drinking the potion. Rani instead drains the potion in an anthill where Cobra resides. The Cobra visits her every day in the form of her husband, Apanna. Apanna doubts her chastity when he realizes that Rani is pregnant, and she has to prove her chastity in front of others. Rani enters the world of sexual fulfillment with the help of Naga, the Cobra. He makes her comfortable enough to open up to him both emotionally as well as physically. Apanna, her husband, he does not speak to her, speak more than a syllable required, but Naga listens to her and even praises her beauty. He understands her loneliness and her desire to see her parents. Eventually, Rani accepts her desires for Naga and hides her in the dark, dense logs. Rani accepts Naga as a lover and boldly invites him to stay into her hair. The chasm between gender identity and gender expression often leads to a fragmented self, which often leads to a quest for completeness. This ideology justifies the behavior of Aparna, who considers Rani as his possession or a property which cannot be used by any other man. This provided Aparna with the ground to subjugate Rani, to mistreat her when he became suspicious of her fidelity. Abuse on the basis of infidelity of women is justifiable in the views of society, who considers chastity as a quality which is essential for women, without which she is subject to punishment by the village elders, who represent hegemonic patriarchal society. Kanad criticizes patriarchal notion that feminine sexuality is considered to honor and prestige of the family as well as the community of the women. Hence, the tradition of society feels the need to control feminine sexuality. This control is an indirect instrument to impose the ideology of masculine hegemony. Rani has decided to go through the snake ordeal, in order to prove her fidelity to her husband. This is also a magical and mythical device used by the narrator in order to maintain the sanctity of the marriage, as folk tales can never go against the social norms and validate an extramarital affair. Yet Rani had to be brought to justice for being treated so mercilessly by her husband. She's supposed to take cobra in her hand and speak the truth. So this is the whole snake ordeal which is about, and she has to prove her fidelity in front of her husband and the entire village elders, so as to prove her fidelity and in front of the society, basically. So her husband, who publicly called her a whore in front of the whole village, was subdued after this snake ordeal, and he said, I quote, "Forgive me, I am a sinner, I was blind." Thus, the injustice forced upon Rani by Aparna and the hegemonic patriarchal society is subverted within the traditional and cultural framework of society by the use of supernatural element called Naga, the cobra. The next story, the next play which I'm going to talk about is Karnad Haivadan. The core story of Haivadan is about Padmini, which is the central character of the play, married to Devdutt, a Brahmin who is handsome, a scholar, and has distinguished intellectual abilities. His friend Kapila, a Shudra, lacks intellectual and scholarly abilities but presents a well-built and attractive body. Padmini is attracted to Kapila's muscular body and Devdutt's mind, and a vision of an ideal husband has a combination of these qualities of physical strength and intelligence. In her desire for a perfect man, Padmini switches the two heads in a state of emotional excitement. She gets Devdutt in the body of Kapila, and her quest for completeness is quenched for a brief moment. Ironically, Padmini's joy does not last for a long time, as Devdutt begins to lose his muscles, as his basic inclination is towards being a scholar and a poet. Later on, she is again drawn towards Kapil in the forest. She accepts her.
Ansel,
Yes,
Ansel, you please try to sum up within a few minutes.
I'll just sum up in 2 minutes.
Okay.
The crisis of Padmini is that of a modern woman who suffers through the existential conflict of being part of marriage where her sexual needs are not fulfilled. Padmini represents the spirit of a modern woman who is not ready to compromise in terms of intellectual or physical abilities of a partner. She needs a man who can engage her physically as well as mentally. Thus, Kanad explores the awakening of female sexuality through his plays. The female protagonists of his plays are a breath of fresh air. They subvert the conventional orthodox roles of a woman as pativrata or devoted wives. His plays present a remarkable shift in the understanding of female subjectivity, which intends to deracinate the hegemonic practices in a male-centric world. His women characters are bold and vivacious and do not hesitate in going against the societal norms to make their voices heard. They openly dissent against their objectification and treatment as an entity of exchange between men. Karnad projects women's sexuality as something natural and not immoral. This marks the beginning of struggle that post-colonial women in India are yet to cover in order to bring a complete reformation of the society. Thank you.
Ansala Dahia, a
Sir,
good
answer.
presentation on the topic, but I'm extremely sorry. So I thought it was the name of a boy. So in my state, Assam, so male person also having the name Ansal. So I'm sorry. So I call you as he. So he will present like that. I am extremely sorry. Well, it is a nice presentation. So I will make my remark on at the end. So I request the next presenter. He is Mohammad Yaqub Ali. Is he there? Yaqub Ali, an assistant professor at English Islamic University. May I request him? Is it? Hello.
Hello, I'm.
Yaqub Ali.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Are you ready?
Yes, yes, I am ready, but I can't hear you. You are not audible to me.
Yes. Sorry. Am I audible? Am I
You are not
audible?
You are not audible to me.
Oh, you are audible to me. Okay. Hello.
Yeah, yes, yes, sir.
Yes. So my request to all of you, please complete your presentation within 10 minutes. So you please
Yeah.
proceed.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes. You please proceed.
Okay, thanks. Dear scholars, a very good afternoon to you all. I humbly thanks to the chair of this session and the organizer of this international conference. Before presenting my paper, I'd like to introduce myself. This is Mohammad Yaqub Ali, Assistant Professor of English, Islamic University, Bangladesh, Kustia. And the title of my paper is On the Fringe of Existence, the Conditions of the Female Bowels at the Accra of Fakir Lalon Shah. Actually, this paper is based on my field work on the present conditions of the female bowels at the shrine of the Master Baul Fakir Lalon Shah. Was the torchbearer of the marginalized Baul tradition in the undivided Bengal. Rejecting the religious institutions and their constitutional dogma, Fakir Lalon Shah has proposed a world based on humanity and free from class domination, gender discrimination, caste, racial conflict, religious malice, and injustice. As many of his songs indicate, and a host of research findings have revealed, Baul tradition teaches to respect the female bowls as equal to their male partners. Yet in my field trips, I have observed the opposite picture in which the female bowls in or outside Lalon Accra seem to be neglected and oppressed, often led an unsecured and marginalized life. Based on my field experience, I have put a number of recommendations for improving the lot of the female bowls so that they may practice their ritual without fear and hindrance. The origins of the Baul doctrine date back to the Middle Ages. According to the famous folklorist and researcher Upendranath Bhattacharya, the Baul religion emerged in a complete form from 1625 to 1675 AD in Bengal approximately. Brojendranath Shil opines the emergence of Baul is to be from Muslim and Siddha Fakir in the early 15th century. No Baul songs actually were found in between 1625 to 1675, although the origin of Baul religion was traced during this period. Ahmed Sharif rightly said it was developed entirely in the 19th century through the pursuit and creation of Fakir Lalon Shah. Lalon enabled to create a unique genre of Baul song with his unparalleled worship and philosophy. There is no exaggeration to call Lalon the best and the greatest father of Baul song. Lalon songs are considered at the mainstay in the interpretation, analysis, and realization of Baul's theory, philosophy, and practice. Lalon can therefore be identified as the best spokesman on Baul sadhana. That means worship. The name Baul Shah, the name Lalon Shah is deeply associated with the mystic adoration, music, culture, and lives of undivided Bengal. He is not only regarded as Mahatma Lalon Fakir, but also social reformer, mystic bard, songwriter, thinker, and rebellious. He was born in a fanatic society ruled by scripture in a critical time of undivided Bengal. Lalon Shah was an outstanding person of popular mysticism. The songs, pursuits, and philosophy in Lalon have transcended the boundaries of secular life and have also touched and inspired educated civic intellectuals. His open-mindedness, non-communal consciousness, sociability, and human majesty added a rare and fancy dimension to his bold character. Lalon brought an awakening in rural life of undivided Bengal, just as Raja Ram Mohan Roy was the face of the Renaissance in Bengali civil society. As it is controversial that whether Lalon was born in a Hindu or Muslim family and where it was, were informed clearly by the prolific scholar, researcher, and folklorist Professor Abul Hasan Chaudhary, who said that Lalon was born at an infamous village, Bharara of Chapra Union, under Kumarkhari police station in the district of Kustia. But his parents' information on his caste, race, and religion are not mentioned, rejecting all religious institutions and their constitutional dogma, race, caste, and class ইচ্ছাং সব লোকে কয় লালন কি জাত সংসারে লালন বলে জেতের কি রূপ দেখলাম না এই নজরে. He also says that there is no caste of a devotee. He says it in his song. ভক্তির দ্বারে বান্ধা আছেন সাই হিন্দু কি জবন বলে তার জাতের বিচার নাই. লালন also sang with logic. বিবিদের নাই মুসলমানি পৈতা নাই যার সেও তো বাউনি ভজরে ভাই দিব্য জ্ঞানে লালন তেমনি জাত একখান. Society was divided into classes, castes, and tribes, and it was tied to the hard shackles of caste during Lalon. So Lalon wants to burn these unequal divisions to ashes in the fire of his rebellion. জাত না গেলে পাইনে হরি কিছার জাতের গৌরব করি লালন কয় জাত হাতে পেলে পুরাতাম আগুন দিয়ে. He first left his philosophy, devotion to humanity, and countless disciples on 17 October 1890, and an article on Lalon Fakir in a sub-editorial in the Hitkori published on 31st October 1890, which was brief but informative. The sheen of Lalon and its significance. As it is very little known about the early life of Baul King Fakir Lalon Shah. After his death, a news article on him is published in the Hitkori on 31st October 1890, where it is known that on the way of a pilgrimage, Lalon caught smallpox and he was abandoned by his companions as he was supposed to be dead. Meanwhile, he was raised from the river Kaliganga and looked after with great care by Molum Shah and his wife Moti Jan, but he lost his one eyesight. Lalon here started a new life with little land and house given by Molum Shah as they had no issues. And then he met Darvesh Shiraz Shah and influenced by his philosophy and song, to whom he submitted himself as a disciple after being initiated, that means Diksha. Afterwards, he instituted his Akra, Shirin of Lalon, almost 2 kilometers far away from Kustia town, on the bank of the Kaliganga river at Seuria under Kumarkhali police station in Kustia, where he used to teach his disciples and devotees principles and spiritual techniques. His disciples used to address him as Shai, and the lyric of his song is called Kalam, that means holy and valuable speech. He also started his mission of searching Moner Manush. Therefore he says, Manush bhojle sonar manush hobe. The devotees and disciples of Fakir Lalon Shah come to this place to attend the pitch of the chol and to receive the grace of the Guru. That's why the shrine is a holy and significant place to them. Lalon's religious belief, philosophy, and sadhana, worship. A controversy regarding Lalon's religion continues to ensue since a few scholars during the Pakistani period wanted to label him as a Muslim. Lalon expert Professor Dr. Abul Hasan Chaudhary, a teacher of Islamic University, told most popular English daily in Bangladesh, the Daily Star, Lalun did not disclose his religious background even to his close associates. Rather, in many verses, he took a stance against any form of institutional religion except humanism. Throughout his life, Lalun was a believer in free thought, wanted to spread a philosophy on humanism, wanted to change the entrenched society, took a vow to develop humanism by removing casteism. That's why he had to tolerate the insults as an atheist, heretics, Hursan, etc. The main theme of the songs of Lalon Shah is the concept that the body is the seat of all truths, and the Baul asceticism is based on supremacy of the Guru or preceptor. The main objective of Baul ascetic practice is to trace and get company of the inherent and formless supreme being, who can only be achieved by divine love, devotion, and meditation. Lalon Shah has indicated a guideline for the emergence of a religious, racial, and caste discrimination-free society. Throughout his entire life, Lalon sang of a society where there will be no caste domination, racial conflict, gender discrimination, religious malaise, etc. And all will live in peace and happiness. This is because Lalon sang, এমন সমাজ কবে গো সৃজন হবে যেদিন হিন্দু মুসলমান বৌদ্ধ খ্রিস্টান জাতি গোত্র নাহি রব.
Well, Yaqub Ali, you please proceed to the conclusion part.
Okay, thanks. About Baul King Fakir Lalon Shah is timeless, whose song, message, luring tune, and philosophy are always contemporary, powerful, and popular to the world people. Therefore, it is treasured to us. With the passage of time, the message and philosophy of his song enabled to draw the attention of the people of all spheres nowadays. His song and philosophy have influenced many literary giants, filmmakers, and dramatists. Lalon's philosophy and life are written in the writing of Rabindranath Tagore, Kazi Nazrul Islam, Allen Ginsberg, Bob Dylan, Shaukat Usman, Shamsur Rahman, Sunil Gangopadhyay, etc. The famous director Gautam Ghosh, Tanvir Mukammel, and so on have made film about Lalon. Lalon has emerged as a humanist, philosopher, devotee, rebellious, and a poet of non-communal consciousness. A yoga teacher of France, Deborah Jannat, initiated with a veteran Baul Nahir Shah, and even she now has been living at Dakla of her Guru after getting married following Guru's command and being captivated by Lalon's philosophy. Nevertheless, whenever we observe the real picture of an Akra, we get the opposite picture of Lalon's philosophy. Though in Lalonic philosophy, male and female are treated equally as a human. Mostly, female Bauls are not allowed to attend any Sadhu Sangha, a place where all Bauls meet or assemble with a view to singing and discussing on Lalonic philosophy without the permission of their partner. Besides this, they are to lead a marginalized, insecure, and miserable life. After talking with the Bauls, it is very clear to me that almost all of the Bauls are in vulnerable condition. A fact is Kangalini Supia, a veteran singer, composer, and female Baul, is now about to die due to poverty, whose only daughter seeks help from government and others. Lalon envisioned a society based on humanity and free from class domination, gender discrimination, caste, racial conflict, injustice, and religious malaise. Nonetheless, it remains as a dream till now. Lalon is the only mystic bird who raised his voice in favor of spiritual freedom as a priority of a person. It is astonishing when we think about this wild, unlettered man roaming the dark tracts of rural Bengal, who sang of a classless and gender-equal society, long before the birth of the modern philosophy of feminism. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mohammad Yaqub Ali. A good presentation. Hello. Yes, thank you, Mohammad Yaqub Ali. A good presentation. You cited some beautiful poetic sentences Thank you for your presentation. And
Welcome. It's my great pleasure.
yes, yes. Next paper is a joint paper, and it will be presented by Mousumi Aslam and Dr. V.S. Bindu. So I request one of them to present their paper, please. Can you please be strict with to the time? Mousumi Aslam or Dr. V.S. Bindu.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Mousumi.
Welcome.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes, you are audible. You please continue.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon, all. My title of the paper is The Psychological Deterioration. Playwright and a Rhodes Scholar who predominantly worked in South Indian cinema and Bollywood. Now, this paper attempts to study the psychological degeneration of characters and the presence of mythical elements in the play Yayadi. His plays usually are found very close to common people with a very realistic approach towards the issues of humans. He used not only myths to frame the plot, but also to pinpoint the human psyche and cultural practices in the society. At the same time, he took mythical elements from the Mahabharata with an intention to examine the ludicrousness of life with all its fundamental passions and crises. Girish Karnad, he is associated with the Navya movement in Kannada literature, which literally means of the new. That is a modernist phase in Kannada literature, where the characteristic features are disillusionment, biting sarcasm against tradition, quest for meaning, values in the present. So Karnad, along with many other writers, created a new ambience in Kannada theatre. And he is bold enough to explore newer combinations from traditional structures for effective communication. In Eliot's term, Karnad is a writer who is conscious of the presentness of the past. And Yayadi, the play which is taken for the study, it's a tale taken from Mahabharata. And in all his plays, he falls back on the past for his themes such as folklore, mythology, legends, and history. Now, coming to myth and psychology, a myth is a traditional rudimentary narrative by which every culture validates itself. Myths usually deal with the origins of human and natural phenomena. There are many psychological theories which were developed by Sigmund Freud and C.G. Jung. They had drastically changed the study of myth, legends, folklore, and religion. And now myths are seen as expressions of universal human condition and desire. Moreover, these studies reveal more rewarding information about human nature and society. And the world witnessed the dissemination of psychological commentaries on the anatomy of myths. And here, the advancement in the field of psychology paved the way for the use of psychological concepts in anthropological researches to define the belief system and religious system in modern human societies. And Freud's psychoanalytical approach and Jung's deep depth psychology contributed much to the reinterpretation of established myths across cultures. And we can define mythology as a belief system constituted by ideas about a concept that is imparted to the members of a group. Now, coming to the myth of Yayadi, the play. The myth of Yayadi is a story found in Mahabharata, and Yayadi's tale is intertwined with the story of his wife Devayani, who is the daughter of Sukracharya, the chief priest of the Asuras. Another character, Shamishta, the daughter of the king of Daitya clan of Asura, once she humiliated and threw Devayani into a well. And later, the Yayadi rescued Devayani by holding her right hand and pulling her out of the well. And they get married. But Sharmista, she is given the punishment of serving Devayani after her marriage because she had done a false deed to her. And Sharmista, agrees to serve Devyani considering her father's honor. Gradually, Sharmista gets attracted to Yayadi and she entices him that results in the marriage without the knowledge of Devyani. Having realized Yayadi's disloyalty, she again complains to Sukracharya, and who then curses Yayadi with premature old age. And Sukracharya gives him a solution to, if anyone is willing to exchange for his old age, he will be able to regain his youth. And finally, one of his sons, Puru, he agrees and gives up his youth for his father. Yayadi pursues the worldly pleasures with a revived interest, but the more he consumes it, the thirstier he grows. And finally, Yayadi realizes the vicious effects of untamed and never-ending desire. So he withdraws to the forest to perform penance. Now coming to Girish Karnad's reinterpretation of the myth of Yayadi. So in retelling of the story, Karnad infuses the age-old Yayadi myth with new meanings and psychological insights. Karnad's play is a psychological exploration of human desire. In the play, Karnad blends the issues of class, caste, gender, and desire. Karnad's Yayadi goes through a series of horrible consequences, and the play is a reflection on the existential crisis and moral and psychological deterioration of man. At the same time, he introduces some new characters into the narrative, named Chitralekha and Swarnalata, to establish his point. Chitralekha, who is Puru's wife, who wants to have a child, finds it difficult to accept her husband's old age. Despite her wish to offer herself to Yayadi, she commits suicide due to humiliation. And Yayadi is horrified to see the unfortunate events followed by deed. He finally decides to return the favor to Puru in a moment of regret. Here, Karnad's Yayadi is not a truth seeker and a spiritually reformed man, as we see in the original story. His long span in the pursuit of happiness in finite things reveals the futility of human chase after desire and gratification. The search for material pleasure always ends in sorrow, disappointment, satiety, and disillusionment. And Yayadi says, I thought there were two options, life and death. No, it is living and dying we have to choose between. So in the South text, both Yayadi and Puru are free from existential crisis. They are well aware of their motivations and choices. They don't suffer from any guilt or remorse. And the play advocates the principle that each individual is what one chooses to be or make oneself. And the individual is placed at the center of the scene in Karnad's craft. In his interview with Tantan, yes, sir?
So you please mention only the key points. So you
Okay, sir. Okay.
We have limitation of time, please.
Okay, sir. So Karnad, through his characters, delineate the predicament of being human, and Yayadi is torn between sensuality and responsibility. And Puru is dilemmatic about duty and desire, while Chitralekha appears to be inherently selfish in her proposal to Yayadi, and Sharmista is evidently self-centered and vicious. So through the portrayal of the deteriorating individual self, Karnad posits a critique of the established and unchallenged values of Indian culture. And here Chitralekha's unwillingness to accept her husband's sacrifice is an example for this. She also questions the moral authority of Yayadi in accepting her husband Puru's youth for the sake of his bodily pleasures. And here, to conclude, Girish Karnad's plays deal with man's confrontation with the elemental passions of existence. And with his strategy of revisionist telling of myths and folktales, he penetrates into the conflictual, chaotic, elusive, and contradictory nature of human existence. And by doing this, he tries to deconstruct many socio-cultural myths regarding human nature. And the fundamental struggle of being human is one of the recurrent concerns of Karnad. And this concern is visible even in his very attempt in the form of the play of Yayadi. And here the play Yayadi, it's a myth plus psychology technique, constitutes one of the significant dimensions of Girish Karnad's dramaturgy. and his play Yadi stands out as a triumph in this regard. Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Mousumi, you have a realistic approach towards the issues of human beings in your paper. Thank you. Paper presenter, the last but not the least, Sada Firdaus Alam. So he is a PhD research scholar, Department of English, Rasi University, Jharkhand. So I request him to present his paper. And Firdaus Alam.
Yes, sir. So thank you for introducing me. So I would like to share my PPT. Hello.
Yes. You please continue. Please try to sum
Yes,
up due to the time constraint. So you please
Yes, sir.
try to present within 9 or 10 minutes.
Yes, sir. Sure. I will. Okay. Thank you.
Will you continue, please?
Yes, sir. I'm sharing. Is my PPT visible, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So good afternoon, one and all. I am Sada Firdaus Alam, a PhD research scholar of University Department of English, Ranchi University, Jharkhand. The title of my presentation is Language and Gender, Difference in Communication by Societal and Psychological Influence. So in this presentation, the aim will be to represent the representation of gender in language, the conversational characteristics of men and women, and the social and psychological limitations of style and communication of the two genders. The idea that men and women are different in their ability to communicate has been one of the most popular beliefs about gender differences that exists to this day. Whether it is with words, tone of voice, emotional expression, or body language, the way in which males and females communicate have been explored in a variety of ways to distinguish the characteristics that makes us so different. The relationship between language and gender gives the impression that the issue was first noticed by feminist critic, which is groundless. The person who first pioneered in that study of gender and language was Lakoff, whose work confirmed that women's speech had some features that were different from men's speech. In John Gray's popular book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, a practical guide for improving communication and getting what you want in a relationship, he outlines the underlying differences in communication styles between men and women. Gray's book is one of the most important benchmark pieces of literature on communication differences across gender of the 20th century. He suggests that men and women are so different in their approaches to communicating that they are from different planets. They have different needs, goals, and values in the way they communicate. Understanding these differences is the key to creating and maintaining successful relationships by being aware of how other genders communicate and thus adapting one's style accordingly. Here I would ponder upon the difference between sex and gender. Sex and gender are not the same. Sociologists and most other social scientists view sex and gender as conceptually distinct. Sex refers to physical or physiological differences between males and females, including both primary sex characteristics and secondary characteristics such as height and muscularity. Gender is a term that refers to social or cultural distinctions associated with being male or female. Gender identity is the extent to which one identifies as being either masculine or feminine. A person's sex, as determined by his or her biology, does not always correspond with his or her gender. Therefore, these two terms are not interchangeable. Strategies and styles of communication. If I talk about this, then the speech view that women and men use different strategies and styles of communication is considered a fact in the literature. The speech of the sexes is described in a great variety of ways. The criteria here can be linguistics, sociological, psychological. Language and communication matter more to women than to men. Women talk about more than men. Women are more verbally skilled than men. Men's goal in using language tend to be about getting things done, whereas women's tend to be about making connections to other people. How do males and females differ in their communication style? Although the literature is quite extensive and the findings are somewhat mixed, when gender differences are reported, they generally reveal more competition, assertiveness, and authority by male speakers, and more collaboration, agreeableness, and warmth by females. Male speech is the unmarked standard form, and it sets the benchmark, whereas the female speech was considered to be the marked form. Therefore, female's language is thought to be less powerful. Gender differences, if I see socially, then studies on children show that boys and girls begin to differ in their language as early as preschool. Boys tend to play in large groups that are hierarchically structured. Their group has a leader. The status is negotiated via orders or telling jokes and stories. They have games which have winners and losers. They boast about skill, size, and ability. On the other hand, girls, they tend to play in small groups or in pairs. The center of girls' social life is her best friend. Within the group, intimacy is the key. Differentiation is measured not by status, but by relative closeness. Many of their activities do not have winners and losers. Rather, they play games in which everyone gets a turn. Girls are not expected to boast. In fact, they are encouraged to be humble, nor expected to give orders. Otherwise, they would be bossy. Men and women differ psychologically in the way they act, from the style in which they communicate to the way in which they attempt to influence others. These gender differences in communication and influence tactics have implications for gender differences across leadership styles of men and women. So there are some claims that women talk too much about everything. Men will often reject a topic of conversation introduced by women, while women will accept the topics introduced by men. They discuss male topics like sports, business, politics, economics, etc. On the other hand, men don't talk about emotions. Women are considered to be more polite, indecisive, and hesitant, whereas men insult each other frequently. They are competitive in conversation and also try to dominate conversation. Women, yeah?
You please proceed to the findings of a paper. Please, so due to the time restriction, I have
sure.
to... No
problem. Okay. So if I see the patterns of communication, then male patterns of communication tend to be based on the notion of a social hierarchy, while female patterns tend to be network oriented. Generally, women focus more on creating intimacy, while men focus more on asserting independence and seeking respect. Male avoid eye contact, while female use eye contact. Here, we see that sexist elements in language, those are not that innocent. The women's movement made sexism in language a political issue. Gender scholars have argued that English and other languages are made by men and for men in order to represent their point of view and perpetuate it. In this world view, women are marked as deviant and deficient or made invisible. This is so-called sexism in language. Can be demonstrated with many different kinds of evidence. I have given few examples also over here. The first type of evidence involves asymmetries between pairs of gender differentiated terms such as sir and madam. The female term has negative associations, while the male term is either neutral or positive, as I can show you in these two examples below. And another is the marking of the words and expressing referring to women, just like career woman, lady, girl, likewise. Finally, I would like to come to the conclusion that the speech of men and women differs because boys and girls have brought up differently and men and women have different roles in society. The effect of biology on the behaviors and activities of, it's not coming down. Yeah. So the effect of biology on the behaviors and activities of both genders is undeniable. However, the effect of biology on the language acquisition of females is in a different way has not been approved yet. Based on this, it can be said that language teachers should use different language teaching materials and techniques for students of different genders. In addition, different learning styles in language learning and strategies should be taken into consideration for different genders. Here I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sada.
Thank you.
Well, hello. Yes. So
Hello.
the opener of this technical session. So I'm coming one by one. So Dr. Madhusri Kalamani, the opener of this technical session, she has the keyword that is ecofeminism, which is a theory of representing women through symbolic images of art and nature. And she has narrated how a part of nature is moved down, and it symbolizes the suppression of man over women, and how a woman rebels to exist. So a very heart-touching point, she has pointed out that both art and nature are naturally related to women, as they have the common connectivity of creation. So a very nice presentation on the part of Dr. Madhusri Kalamani. And the next presenter was Ansal Dahia. She's a paper titled Subversion of Gender Rules by Girish Karnad. And she puts a question on the secondary position of women. She cited some examples from mythological stories, ancient and religious and philosophical texts, and cinema also, and literature also. And she critically examines Girish Karnad's play and the other creative works where identity of an individual and the quest for completeness are significant themes, which provide her perspective on the rigid patriarchal control and the status of women in society. So it seems an honest attempt on the part of the paper presenter to refute the normative codes of the patriarchal society. So the third paper presenter was Muhammad Yaqub Ali. Yes, he described the present conditions of the female bowls at the shrine of the master Baul Fakir Lalan Shah Yaqub Ali. Baul Fakir Lalan Shah. So Yaqub Ali presented Baul Fakir Lalan Shah, who was he mentioned in his paper, called the torch-bearer of the marginalized Baul tradition in the undivided Bengal. He proposed a world-based on humanity, and this world must be free from class domination and gender domination. The gender discrimination, class, caste, racial conflict, religious malice, and injustice also. So this paper nicely portrayed the female bowls in or outside Lalon Agda, and they were seen to be oppressed and neglected. It is nice to see that that honorable paper presenter has put some recommendation also for improving the condition of the female bowls. So he was followed by a joint paper and Mosumi Aslam. She has presented that particular paper, and she seems having a very realistic approach towards the issues of humans. So myths are used to frame the plot in her paper. It is nice to see that mythical elements from Mahabharata are taken, and it is also it is to examine life with all its fundamental patience and crisis. And they have chosen play name Ayatri of Girish Karnad for this purpose. Also, their study is on psychological degeneration of characters, and also on social cultural problems of traditional Indian society. Of course, it is a nice presentation on their part, and which shows man's eternal struggle to achieve perfection, dreams, and desires. And last paper, but not the least, that was presented by Sada Fardoos Alam. So in her paper, she mentioned the male and female in our society have social and psychological limitation of communication. So her paper was a sincere attempt to find out the relationship between language and gender, and also to focus on the differences between language spoken by men and female folk. So this paper focuses on the representation of gender in language and the conventional characteristics of men and women. Well, so I congratulate all the 5 paper presenters. So they have presented a very nice paper, informative and a beautiful presentation on their part. Hello. So Dr. Subra Jamal.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't think that that we have enough time. So due to the time limitation, should I mean finish here with, or
Yes.
or have an question answer like that?
Sir, I think we are done with this session now.
Oh yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So not exactly there. Hello.
Yeah,
So
sir, I have a question for Sada Firdaus. Can I ask
yes.
my question?
Yes.
Acha, okay. Sada Firdaus, an exceptional paper, I must say. But I have this question that you said men and women are different psychologically.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, so what I need to ask is, are men and women inherently that different, or is it just the social conditioning which has brought about such differences?
No, it's not that they inherit, but I think that it's a social condition that it has made men and women different. See, psychologically also, if I see like when they are an infant, what parents try to do is that they wrap a male child with a blue blanket and a female child with a pink blanket, and they are taught like that you cannot cry. Men are supposed that you cannot cry, you have to be bossy, you are strong, and girls are pampered. This is the condition. So it's not totally psychologically right from their birth, but social influences are there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there more question? So if not, then so I would like to sum up this technical session. Dr. Subra Jamal, what should I do?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So here I would like to come to the end of this technical session. So once again, I congratulate all the paper presenters for their nice presentation. So as I have already mentioned, they have good information and suggestion also they mentioned in their paper. So many thanks to them, and my heartfelt gratitude and regards to you and all the hosts. Thank you, and wish you all a good day.
Thank you so much, sir. It's real pleasure to be with you always, and you have chaired the session so well. Thank you so much for being with us, and congratulations to all the paper presenters. All of them were wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry for I require 10 minutes more. Sorry.
So you want 10 minutes?
No. I have already.
No. That's perfectly, sir. That's perfectly fine, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
You moderated it very well, sir. Thank